This is CBS Eye on the World. Here's John Batchelor.
I'm John Batchelor with Rob Rohlfing, who is the CEO and Executive Chairman of Desert Mountain Energy Corporation. What it means to extract helium from America. Helium is something that I'm learning was not known about much before the 19th century, not at all. And since the 20th century, there's been an assumption the way to get helium is to extract it, a small percentage of the natural gas that comes out of America. This is about resources that the United States and our allies in North America can control no matter the contest overseas. But I'm fascinated not with the geopolitics, but with the chemistry and the engineering of extracting helium, especially in Arizona, where Rob tells me it's different than the rest of the country. You don't need to deal with natural gas. But I get ahead of myself because I'm now lost. Rob, a very good day to you. Okay, we're in Arizona, and we are looking at a rig that is the ambition to extract helium. What actually happens? Engineer it for me, Rob. Thank you.
What we do different, John, from normal oil and gas operations, we are in an area, we're in a desert. Water is a finite resource. So to honor that commitment, to try to do that, we drill more with air and a little water mist. And then instead of adding other chemicals or other things to deal with downhole conditions, we basically use a term polysaccharides, i.e. sugar. You can pectin, gelatin. You can walk into a grocery store and pull off the shelf everything we use. We use nothing but food-grade additives, basically. That was in an effort to protect all the aquifers. So you start out, John, by drilling one hole, and you go to underneath the base of the known drinking water zones. In this case, the Coconino Aquifer. You set a steel casing. You pump cement down and back up around the outside. Then you drill down to the middle of that because there's some other water zones or aquifers that are rather nasty. And we don't want anything to be able to pollute anything above or below. So then we put in another steel casing and cement it all the way back to the surface. Then we drill down to the deeper zones, basically down to the granite, and we look at all the zones in between. Then we put in another steel casing, pump cement all the way back to the surface again. Then you go in and you know exactly where you hit and saw helium or hydrogen or whatever it is, the other noble gases, and you perforate. It's called, you set charges and they burn 3/8 or half-inch holes and they'll go out to the rock 5-6 feet. Then you start to produce the short version.
How far down are you talking now? You had
3,900 feet is all. This is shallow. As far as oil and gas is, we're not super deep. We're not 20,000 feet deep here. This is very shallow. But there are unique drilling conditions here that are unique to Arizona that people who have come out here have had quite a hard time drilling and getting wells completed properly. So that's why we've actually developed different techniques that are a lot more environmentally friendly and trying to protect the aquifers while we're doing it. Because the other thing you have different here, everywhere else, like in the middle of the United States or in Ohio, where helium has been produced in the past, say from 1918 forward, that was always normally produced in association with what people would normally assume is natural gas. That would be the C1 through C7, methane, ethane, propane, pentane, and then you get in hexanes and tritianes, terpenes, all that type of stuff. Where we're at is primarily by design, we look for where helium was associated with just nitrogen, 90% nitrogen. So we have tried to stay away from that. The difficulty, or it's not really a difficulty, it just brings up a different set of conditions you have to deal with, John. You have to get in here. There's no natural gas, so you can't be stripping it to run a plant. Normally, most other places, they use natural gas. They burn it to run generators or compressors or whatever. There's no power close. We would have to try to get right-of-ways across indigenous peoples federal, state, and private lands. You would just be forever trying to get it. So that's why back in 2008, I originally started designing a plant that runs on solar. We're in Arizona.
Let me restate what I think I've learned. You're drilling in a unique terrain for drilling for helium, different than the rest of the country where we have a bounty of helium, but it's in the natural gas that is extracted. And once it comes up, it's a very small percentage of the natural gas. It needs to be extracted from the natural gas, and that requires the electricity grid, a lot of power.
Yes. It's very labor, it's very energy intensive.
You're drilling where the natural gas is part of nitrogen, not part of, where the helium is part of nitrogen. And you say you're not going very deep, but once it comes up, how do you extract the helium from the nitrogen? And that's where you need power. Is that correct?
That is, because we have the idea of using like pressure swing absorption and membrane units have been around for 70 plus years. What we've done is put different takes on that and utilize our own design on many aspects of it so that it requires basically, John, from 2008 to now, the plant I originally designed till now, the newest plant requires 55% less power. It's huge. When you're out in the middle of nowhere, you've got to conserve power. Just like you have to conserve water, but you have to conserve power. So how do you do this mix? And so that's what we really worked on hard to design, utilizing a lot of things that are off the shelf, but then tweaking them and doing additional design work.
Before we get to the power stage, I want to go back to the drilling. You gave me a lot of products that I can buy in a grocery store. What do you use those for? How do they help the extraction process?
Basically, what you have downhole here, it's not like would be a real hard, say in Oklahoma, it'd be called the hunting lime or a real lime or a real limey sand, something that's really dense, very hard. Here you actually have the salt that serve as part of the cap rock. And the salts are actually made up of potassium and magnesium, along with some sodium chloride. And potassium, as people may or may not be aware, potassium, what you eat in your banana, that is radioactive. So you have a number of things. And as soon as if you try to drill with regular water-based drill muds, then you're getting in, and all they do is we call it calving in. It just basically, you create a large hole in the ground. It just keeps washing out, and you can never get ahead of it. So by using that in very minute amounts and air, it holds it in place. It just puts maybe a micron thick coating on it, and you have to keep replacing it a little bit, but it doesn't require very much. For a 4,000-foot well, you use a couple 100 pounds of sugar.
I see. So you're dealing with an unusual layer that you're going through, something that has a lot of potassium in it, which is different than the American Great Plains, where they drill for
that is correct.
And you're not going very deep. Everything about this seems extremely logical. Is the discovery of Arizona, which is called the Saudi Arabia of helium, is the discovery of Arizona's fields new? Is this something in the 21st century, or...
It was originally found in 1959. There's a discovery well. So it was relatively new. And the difference here is because everywhere else, like in, say, the Hugoton gas field in Kansas, that varied anywhere from 0.4% to a few minor spots where it was 5%. Here, this was the highest percentage of helium found in the world. And that was original well. The initial discovery they claimed was 14.7%. When they actually started putting the well online, it was down to about 11.783%. And then it goes down over time as you produce it. But that's what made it a difference. It was the highest grade of helium ever found.
We're in Arizona. We're drilling for helium. Rob assures me you're not going very deep. This is all news to me, Rob, so I'm getting used to these relative terms. 3,900 feet sounds deep to me, but you said it's not 16,000. I can see that. So now that we've got the helium, now that we've got the nitrogen, we bring up the nitrogen, and the challenge now is to is to process it, to extract the helium from it. Do you release the nitrogen in that process? Is that blown off, or do you use that as well?
Yes, because basically the way the process works, John, the first thing you do, you get out any remaining little bit of moisture, you dry it, you strip off the hydrogen, and we can either turn the hydrogen into water, the little bit that's there, or we can use it and burn it through, we can tank and mix it in with a little tiny bit of ethane and methane that we have, and we can run that through a generator at night if we have to. But it's so minute, it doesn't. Then you get down to a very low CO2 amount, very, very fractional. We're talking 0.003 or 0.03. We're talking very low numbers. That is within an amount that it does not have to be sequestered. Now, nitrogen, we just vent in the process because nitrogen is 3/4 of what we breathe. And at 5,200 foot elevation, which is where this is, the actual nitrogen content of the air up there is about, instead of 73.163, it's 76.2% nitrogen in the air. And so you're not adding a whole lot to it. But it's what we breathe every day.
Right. This is an atmosphere that's mostly nitrogen. I understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've got rid of the nitrogen, and there's the helium. And all of this is what requires the energy in the solar-powered processing. Everything is lit. And the observation I enjoy about renewables is the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. But in Arizona, that's not true. The sun shines all the time in Arizona.
Well, there's only, in the area where this plant is, there's only on average 4.3 days per year where you have ultra low UV. So we have a plant that's slightly oversized, and the batteries is so that you can run at night. And then the ultimate backup is Arizona is really unique in some ways. In this particular area of Arizona, there are about 10 days a year where you may have very low ultraviolet readings. Those happen to fall about 6 months apart, and it's plus or minus 2 weeks. Well, so when we do when you have to do maintenance planned on the plant twice a year, you just schedule it for that time.
I'm speaking with Rob Rohlfing. He's the CEO and executive chairman of Desert Mountain Energy Corporation. He's also my professor in the extraction of helium from the United States of America. You're asking helium. Is this competitive? When we come back, you bet it's competitive. I'm John Batchelor.
This is the Helium Highlight Minute, sponsored by Desert Mountain Energy, an early mover among junior explorers in the helium space. Helium has become one of the most sought-after elements on Earth, yet it is now in short supply. Desert Mountain Energy has positioned itself with over 100,000 acres within the helium-rich areas of the U.S. Southwest, known as the Saudi Arabia of helium. Computers, MRI machines, aerospace, the military, and fiber optics are totally dependent on helium. Helium, now a $6.5 billion market, is projected to grow sharply. Desert Mountain Energy, with its active development program, could play a vital role in meeting the helium demand for years to come. It's time to look at helium and the crucial position of Desert Mountain Energy. This Helium Highlight Minute has been sponsored by Desert Mountain Energy, U.S. trading symbol DMEHF, and in Canada, DME. Web address, desertmountainenergy.com. Desertmountainenergy.com. The preceding may contain forward-looking statements which may not be realized.
This is CBS Eye on the World. Here's John Batchelor.
I'm John Batchelor with Rob Rohlfing, who's giving me a lesson in helium extraction from Arizona in a process that depends upon the renewable energy of the solar panels, the sun. However, why helium? Why Arizona? What is the concern here? Well, it's not just the marketplace that determines all. Helium prices increase, but it's competition, because the other places I learn from Rob where helium is extracted are now at war. Is that right, Rob? Do I have that right? Russia and Ukraine?
There is. There's a lot that was from the Ukraine and also in Russia. Russia had it's called Gazprom, was putting in the Amur plant. And it was supposed to have been online. And they seemed to, right about the same time the war in Ukraine started, they seem to have had a number of fires and explosions. Just happened to coincide with that. And that plant was originally supposed to have been put online in 2013. And here it was 2022. And it finally started to begin to be put online. Very unstable area. There is some production that was touted originally by the Chinese in the Mongolian desert. That has not really come about either. It's tied up more with sulfur in a very high sulfur environment. And that brings in a totally different thing. Normally, if you start having to strip out sulfur, you start losing your helium values. Just chemistry. That's just how you lose it. So it's not an exact science on that aspect. So you just, here in the United States or in Canada, Western Canada, they have some that are tied up with 11 to 20% natural gas, methane. Then you have a bunch of CO2 or nitrogen, and you have half of 1%, a third of 1%, 3/4 of 1%. And we're working in an area that we have more than that. But the plant that we designed, by specifics, instead of having a plant that needed to sit inside of a building, John, that takes up half a football field, this sits inside 5 shipping containers. That's it. And so it's downsized, and this plant can run on from a variation of 300,000 cubic feet a day gas throughput to 10.5 million. So it's a unique setting where we're at. And then we have tried to build this, John, to where we can just duplicate it again and again and again and make it a lot more cost effective to go after a lot more of the smaller areas, which will probably amount to more helium than all the other touted great finds that some people may claim to have.
As an amateur coming to this process just now, having read about it before I spoke with you, this solar-powered processing would travel worldwide, wherever the sun shines a lot, like the Middle East, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm presuming is that you're controlling the overhead because you don't need to lay power lines. You don't need to depend upon the local grid. You don't need to pay those expenses. You're generating your own electricity. Is that correct, Rob?
That is. And it's the type of batteries that we've chosen to use. A lot of people just think, batteries, and they toss them away. This type of battery, you actually can refurbish it. There's like a thin paper with the film in between each one of the cells. And you just have to take that out every 24 months, clean it up, and you refurb it. So you're not throwing all this back into the environment.
Is this a lithium battery you're using?
Yes.
So another product that suddenly is a hot commodity. And the prices are going up at the same time. No longer do people whisper to me about gold reserves. They whisper about lithium reserves.
Yeah, that's it. And that's one of the things by having this, you touched on it, it locks in our operating cost. Originally, when I started looking at this and doing the geology in 99, energy was about 2.9 cents a kilowatt hour. Up there currently, it's 14.7 cents a kilowatt hour. And in other places, I've been told, friends of mine live in New York, they pay 27, 28 cents a kilowatt hour. That's part of the other reason for building a plant, because it locks in your long-term operating costs. This is the world's, I don't know why other people haven't done this. They chose not to. We have built the world's first processing center for helium that runs on solar, that strips hydrocarbons out. This is the world's first.
Now, the helium deposits that are under the Great American Plains of Kansas all the way into Canada, they're in natural gas, right? They're not in nitrogen.
There are a few places, but most of those have been depleted. And that's why it adds to the shortage that I think a lot of the talking heads have gone on about how, well, if we do this, we can just get X amount and we'll have suddenly this shortage will go away. Most of the natural gas that's come out of the ground in sandstone and limestone formations, that's gone. It's not just slightly gone, it's gone. And the majority of the natural gas the United States and Canada currently produce comes out of shale. and you don't get it. Like back east by the Marcellus Shale,
right?
Or you go in North Dakota, or you go down the Permian Basin in Texas, and the Hunt and Lime, other than for the Hunt and Lime is getting depleted, so you're into more of the shales, the Caney shales, and that type of stuff in Oklahoma. You're talking less than 0.005% helium. You just can't extract that low of levels.
It would be expensive as well to process. So, and the Arizona situation is simple and straightforward. You've got a power prices controlled. You've got a process where you get more helium out of the nitrogen than you would get helium out of the natural gas in other parts of the United States. And you've got an enormous deposit of helium, not very deep. Is it deeper in Kansas or Canada than it is in Arizona?
Actually, there are places here that there's been helium in Arizona at 250 feet. The original helium well that was found in southeast Kansas was 217 feet, and it didn't burn. They called it wind gas, is what they used to call it, because it wouldn't burn. And it was tied up basically with nitrogen and CO2, so it didn't burn. And so they just ignored it. So it was normally shallow, even like in Colorado, where there's another national reserve in southeastern Colorado in Animas County. That is very shallow, and it's very low pressure. That's the other thing. They may have only 100 or 60 pounds of pressure. It's very low pressure. You can have some all right volumes, but they're not huge. Like a regular natural gas well at 3,000 feet, you'd be looking at maybe 2,900 to 4,100 if it was a virgin territory. Basically, everywhere that higher percentages of helium is found tends to be rather low pressure, tends to be more in the 900 PSI range.
Your wells right now, what is your prospect for you're producing to process, and what are your plans to expand, Rob? We have a couple of minutes.
Basically, in the last 2 years, we drilled 5 wildcats and 3 developmental wells. So we have 4 wells in the McCauley field where we have put in the first plant. We will be bringing those online. Then we'll be trucking some others in for like Gunner Dome, the last well we drilled, and other areas. There's an opportunity that we may choose over time to deal with some other people as they find something that's maybe they could produce it, but they don't want to get paid nothing on the dollar by one of the majors. So we look forward to doing that opportunity.
Rob Rohlfing is the professor that whom I depend upon to teach me about helium. He's also the CEO and executive chairman of Desert Mountain Energy Corporation, which is straightforward, desertmountainenergy.com for you to learn more. I'm John Batchelor.
This is the Helium Highlight Minute, sponsored by Desert Mountain Energy, an early mover among junior explorers in the helium space. Helium has become one of the most sought-after elements on Earth, yet it is now in short supply. Desert Mountain Energy has positioned itself with over 100,000 acres within the helium-rich areas of the U.S. Southwest, known as the Saudi Arabia of helium. Computers, MRI machines, aerospace, the military, and fiber optics are totally dependent on helium. Helium, now a $6.5 billion market, is projected to grow sharply. Desert Mountain Energy, with its active development program, could play a vital role in meeting the helium demand for years to come. It's time to look at helium and the crucial position of Desert Mountain Energy. This Helium Highlight Minute has been sponsored by Desert Mountain Energy, U.S. trading symbol DMEHF, and in Canada, DME. Web address, desertmountain.energy.com. Desertmountain.energy.com. The preceding may contain forward-looking statements which may not be realized.